All right, have you ever stopped to think about what keeps our world from just falling into complete and utter chaos? Well, there's this invisible set of rules, almost like an operating system for the entire planet, that guides how countries interact with each other. We call it international law, and today we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works. But that immediately brings up a huge question, right? If every country is its own boss, who on earth gets to make the rules for everyone? I mean, unlike the laws in your country, there's no world parliament writing laws, no global police force to make arrests. So where does this law even come from? So let's start with a classic definition from the legal scholar L. Oppenheim. The two key words you got to grab onto here are customary and conventional. Think of conventional rules like written contracts. These are the formal agreements and treaties countries sign. But customary rules, those are more like the unwritten rules of the road. They're behaviors that countries follow over and over because they feel legally obligated to. It's law built not just on paper, but on practice. Okay, to really get a grip on how this all works, let's go on a little journey. Let's imagine we're creating a brand new country from scratch. How does a piece of land with some people on it become a full-fledged member of the international club? What are the rules for that? Well, believe it or not, international law actually gives us a recipe. The 1933 Montevideo Convention lays out 4 essential ingredients for being a state. First, you need a permanent population. Second, a defined territory. Third, a government that's actually in charge. And fourth, and this is crucial, the capacity to have relationships with other states. Whenever you hear debates about places like Kosovo or Palestine, they almost always come back to these exact 4 points. It's basically the official birth certificate for a new country. But here's the catch. Just having those 4 ingredients doesn't automatically get you a seat at the big kids' table. To really be a part of the world, our new state needs a membership card. It needs to be recognized by the countries already in the club. And this leads us to one of the classic debates in international law. On one side, you have the constitutive theory, which says that recognition from other countries is what creates you as a state. Without it, you just don't exist legally. But on the other side, you've got the declaratory theory, which says, nope, the state already exists. If it meets the criteria, recognition is just other countries acknowledging that fact. So which idea usually wins out in the real world? Well, a really important moment was the Tinoco arbitration case. See, an arbitrator had to decide if a new government in Costa Rica was legit, even though big powers like Great Britain had refused to recognize it. And the ruling was crystal clear. Because the government was effectively in control of the country, it was a valid government. This was a huge win for the declaratory theory, basically saying that facts on the ground often matter more than political opinions from abroad. Okay, so our new state is born, it meets the criteria, and it's starting to get recognized. It's officially a player in the global game. But what are the rules of that game? How do countries make binding promises? And more importantly, what happens when someone breaks them? The main rulebook is made up of treaties. These are by far the most important source of international law. You can just think of them as legally binding contracts between countries. They cover absolutely everything, from trade deals and environmental protection to the rules of war. Now, the entire system of treaties, all of it, rests on one incredibly powerful Latin principle, pacta sunt servanda. It simply means agreements must be kept. It's this core, fundamental idea that when you make a promise, you have to follow through in good faith. Without this, the whole house of cards would come tumbling down. Which, of course, brings us to the next very logical question. People break promises all the time, and guess what? So do countries. So what actually happens when a state violates a treaty or breaks some other international rule? Is there any real accountability? Oh, for sure. This is where the whole concept of state responsibility kicks in. International law is very clear. Every internationally wrongful act automatically triggers the legal responsibility of the state that did it. The key thing to remember is that breaking a rule isn't just a political oopsie, it's a legal breach that has real consequences. And what is that consequence exactly? Well, the goal is to make things right. This landmark ruling from the Corzo factory case set the gold standard. It said that the fix, or reparation, has to try and completely wipe out all the consequences of the illegal act. The goal is to restore the situation to what it would have been if the bad thing had never, ever happened. So how does a state actually do that? Well, the law gives them a toolbox with 3 main options. The number 1 choice is restitution. Literally giving back what was taken or fixing what was broken. If that's not possible, then the state has to pay financial compensation for the damage. And finally, for injuries that aren't about money, like an insult to a nation's honor, the fix is satisfaction, which can be something like a formal apology or punishing the officials responsible. This all sounds very neat and tidy, doesn't it? But it brings us to the final and maybe the most mind-bending part of international law. If there's no global police force to make countries pay up or apologize, what gives these rules any real teeth?
And this is really the heart of the matter. International law is just built differently. It's totally decentralized. It's missing all the things we think of when we think of law. There is no world government passing laws for everyone, no global cops on the beat, and no world court that can just force a country to show up.
So where does its power come from then? Well, this very famous line from the SS Lotus case gives us the wild answer. The rules of international law are binding on countries because the countries themselves have agreed to be bound by them. Its power, it comes from their own free will. Its authority is based on their consent. And that leaves us with the ultimate paradox, the big question at the center of it all. We have this legal system that's supposed to govern the most powerful players on the planet, but its entire authority is based on their own consent to be governed. So is it really law in the same way we think of law, or is it something else entirely? That is the fundamental puzzle at the very heart of our global order.